Yeah, so good morning, Gary Griffith.
How you doing?
And welcome
it's
to
a pleasure to be on the non-PNM Power Breakfast Show this morning.
Oh God, behave yourselves. Don't start.
Yeah, we're not going there this morning.
Behave yourself. So you know, I suppose we could start with the poll. What do you think about the poll in terms of, do you think?
Yeah, well, you know, to the 23 people who said yes, the reason why they are saying yes is because Keith Rowley said so. And this is what I am here this morning to ask persons with an independent mind. I remember Donald Trump said something once, he could go down in Times Square and shoot someone in cold blood and they will still vote for him. So because Keith Rowley came with a piece of paper and said, this has happened, that is the justification that 23 people say, yes, it is true, because Keith Rowley said so. And it could go both ways. I'm not here about PNM or UNC. I am here to try to get the country. We need to be mature. Stop just blindly supporting and agreeing with what people say because you support them politically. Keith Rowley has made a statement. And because he said that, automatically it has been generated in the minds of some. It is true because Rowley said that. So let me clarify. In the first instance, this whole thing with the SSA, this government has become an audit government. They had an audit, and what they do, they hire persons, pay them big money, turn them into investigators, sometimes with no investigative capacity or training, and then they write a report and then read the report. And sometimes they go in parliament to read the report with lies, which is the place that you can go and not be sued. So we had the Pritchard and Barrington audit report investigation. We had the Stanley John FUL investigation. We had the Craig audit report investigation. We had the Auditor General audit report. We have the SSA audit report. We have the other one with Stanley John and the AG office audit report. We have a financial procurement audit report. That is what they do. Hire people who may be working for them, pay them money, and put out an audit. So you have done an audit on the SSA, an audit, and come up based on an audit to state that there was a situation to destabilize the country and overthrow the government. These comments have been so irresponsible because it has done irreparable damage to our reputation internationally. We have countries now blacklisting and red flagging us by stating this country, they are terrorists, they are persons trying to overthrow the government, the unit that is equivalent to the CIA has now been compromised, and all of this, up to now, not one person has been held for it. So we to the 23 people who have said yes, you have now agreed that there's been an attempted coup, and not one person's name has been called, not one person has been arrested. So the perpetrators, the assassins, the terrorists, the coup conspirators are still out there. So what you have done is totally embarrassed our country internationally by making an accusation, an allegation, because that is what it all is. So everything in these reports are allegations. No facts, no data, no witnesses, no suspects, no evidence, no arrest, no conviction, no charges. And you have said yes. I think it is rather unfortunate.
Yeah, but the Prime Minister, but I mean, okay, I hear you, but the Prime Minister is the one saying these things, even though under the privilege of Parliament, but he is the one saying these things. Mm-hmm. So when the Prime Minister says something like that, it's going to carry weight with citizens listening, especially when it comes to an issue of national security and the concerns of national security. And we have had attempted coups before. So it's not that the country is unaware that we have never had anything like this happen before in this space. So there would be concern, and there would be some people obviously leaning in the direction that what the Prime Minister is saying is authentic and is a real source of concern. Are you suggesting that what the audit, because they are audits trying to examine what took place, are you suggesting that we should not be concerned?
Oh, not at all. Quite the opposite. My point is, there's a saying you can't be half pregnant. You come out in the open and make damning allegations about something with no evidence, no witnesses, nobody being charged, and have you now compromised this investigation in the first place? Because you will say it is ongoing. If it is ongoing, why would you make a public statement to put fear in the country, to affect our international reputation, to probably cause the individuals now to immediately hold back and hold back from or try to cover themselves now from any situation that can cause them now to be arrested? You have now compromised the so-called investigation if it is still ongoing. And that is my point. It is the same thing you did with Firearms. You rushed in there, started making all of these allegations, and 3 years later, from the Stanley John report and everything, not one person arrested, not one person charged, not one person convicted, based on these 3 audits. based on you hiring civilians with no investigative training. The same thing has happened here. You hired a brigadier general who was never involved in intelligence gathering unit. I was in charge of the Defense Force Intelligence Unit. I was the youngest officer that served in the attempted coup. So people who want to attack me or question me, let's deal with the facts. You hire a brigadier general who I have the world of respect for, who was never an investigating officer, to do an audit. And this audit comes up by stating that people within the SSA were involved in conspiracy, virtual terrorists, and forming an attempted coup. Where's the police in all of this? This is my point. Whether it is firearms, whether it is the Auditor General, whether it is financial procurement legislation, whether it is missing files in the AG office, the police continue to be sidelined, and you compromise the investigation by hiring people, civilians, who will now do a report, and because of their inability to understand investigative procedure, they can compromise the investigation. And I'll give you a simple example, gentlemen. You state that up to now, the individual, Roger Best, has never even been questioned about it. So you make a damning allegation about the SSA, and the person in charge of the SSA at the time has not been questioned. So you accuse these, and then obviously it starts at the top. You accuse him and all the other people, and their biggest concern, their biggest evil action is the fact that they are God-fearing. It is unfortunate that the religious organizations have not stood up on this. The biggest concern is that why would 8 people be so religiously inclined? Because they fear God, because they love their God, because they are church-going people. That becomes a bad thing. We have reached that point of evil in this country. 8 persons have been hired out of 400, and because they were church-going, you turn them into referring to them as a Jim Jones cult. That is very damning accusations. And all these individuals who were fired, they were all polygraphed, gentlemen. They were fully polygraphed. Additionally, what is not being told to the public, either based on ignorance and not doing the investigation properly, is that it was the PNM government that transferred the Kamuto barracks to the SSA. Kamuto barracks was previously by the Special Anti-Crime Unit, that's the PNM sort. That unit in Kamuto, there were thousands and hundreds of thousands or millions of ammunition, weapons belonging to the Defense Force and the police. Brigadier Dillon, as the Minister of National Security, transferred this to the SSA. So the SSA became the custodian for Kamuto Barracks. Many police officers and units will go to Kamuto Barracks to train. So they're not even checking to realize, have these 70,000 rounds been utilized by the training of these organizations? And I hold no brief for Roger Best and the individuals involved, because whether they are guilty or not, that is for them to deal with. My concern is you totally compromising an investigation while it is still ongoing, make damning allegations without any evidence, any witnesses, any data, any proof, nobody be in charge. So you have stated out that there are conspirators to overthrow a government. There are people out there that will involve in an attempted coup, but they are still active. That is a very dangerous precedent.
Well, 3 of them have been charged. I mean, not with regard to certain.
No, Richard, being charged because you didn't sign a document to hand over 2 guns to trying to state that they tried to overthrow a government and they're involved in terrorist activities.
I was just correcting the fact that nobody was charged. People were charged, but not necessarily for the allegations of a conspiracy.
Correct.
But it has to be passing strange, Gary, that so many people from that unit were all attending the same church, the same specific church, and that now, of course, the report is not completely public. It's not public. So, but there were inferences from the Prime Minister's statement on it that there was a certain amount of nepotism and family members, etc., coming into that unit, not through proper recruitment, with regard to filling up the ranks of that particular unit. And a lot of them, and a lot of the senior members were members of a small church, which is what they're referring to as a cult, I'm assuming, which is what they're referring to as a cult, the Jerusalem Bible Church or whatever it was called. Mm-hmm. You don't find that curious? As you don't find that would be something that would raise a red flag?
But Richard, you and I went to a church boys' school. We had to sing and go to church on a regular basis at St. Mary's College. That is a concern because 8 people out of 400 in the SSA. Sorry, Richard, you were saying something?
I'm asking whether you would if you were looking at this, wouldn't that have been a red flag for you if you were investigating the issue?
Yeah, okay, and I'm sorry to segue, but just to clarify, the lady who was the interrupting police investigator, what Richard just did, and there's a difference with interrupting persons to seek clarification or confirmation of a point. That is not lack of manners. That is somebody who is doing an interview and is seeking clarification whilst the person is speaking. That is not being rude and interrupting. Being rude and interrupting is whilst the person is speaking and you do not like what the person is saying, so you decide to interrupt them to turn it into a rum shop talk. So to the interrupting woman police officer investigator who wanted to compare what happened with me yesterday and what Richard just did, that is what hosts do. Okay, so to educate you, Miss Interrupting Police Investigator, the host can interrupt to get clarification on your point or confirmation. It is different to what Wendell did, being rude and obnoxious to interrupt me whilst I was speaking because he was upset about what I was stating and had the audacity to say it is my right to interrupt you when I feel. The way my parents brought me up would have been different to Wendell. So going back to the other point, Richard, yeah. So if 8 persons in the SSA were involved in a religious organization out of 400 odd employees, what is the problem with that? Have we reached such a point of being so evil in this country that someone being part of a religious organization must red flag and debar you from being part of our intelligence agencies? I would rather all 400 be religious, God-fearing persons than to have 400 evil persons who will probably be seeking the devil's direction. And these individuals, by the way, gentlemen, were fully polygraphed. They all passed and they were fully vetted and they had all of the qualifications. Some of them had PhDs. So remember, so because a politician goes in parliament, which is the one place that you can hold a piece of paper, lie and mislead a country, just as what he has done with Emailgate, just as what he has done with the FUL reports, Parliament is the one place you can you hire people, pay them big money, go into Parliament and lie. Why does he call names? It's just like the FUL gentleman. You say that people had firearms that they changed it from semi-automatic to automatic. That is a lie. That's a criminal offense. Why has no one been charged? You said that people had domestic violence issues and they got their firearms. That is a lie because your wife has to sign it. You stated that people with criminal offenses got firearms. That is a lie. You need a certificate of character. You then said that persons were paying bribes. They admitted paying bribes in an official report. They admitted paying bribes and people received the money. That is a criminal offense. So how could you go in Parliament to say that an official report stated that and nobody has been arrested, nobody has been charged, none of these firearms have been seized and no names called because Keith Rowley said so? That is why I will always call him out because he goes into Parliament to mislead the country. So going back to Richard, to what you said, if 8 persons belong to God and they serve their God, that makes them evil and that is a reason for a red flag? I beg to differ.
So you would not have, if you were investigating, that would not have been a red flag for you?
Definitely not. The red flag is if you fail a polygraph test. The red flag is if there's data, evidence, empirical testing, witnesses, documentation to show that the person is doing something and is not a patriot of this country. Somebody stated that I serve my God. I serve my country. I fear my God. I go to church regularly. That becomes a concern to call them a cult. I think that we have become so evil in this country that even politicians are trying to demonize religious persons. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that because you're religious and God-fearing that you're clean. But if these people are so evil and they have really committed such an act, have them arrested. You can't just come out and this is what Keith Rowley has done over and over. This is Emailgate part 2. It is Emailgate reloaded. You go out there, you smear people's character, you call names, you make accusations, and every word, this is the allegation PNM. It is alleged, it is rumored, we've been told and we have heard. If you're hearing all these things and you have all these allegations, call names, arrest people, remove their firearms. None of this is being done. But then you hear people this morning, yes, it is true, there was an attempted coup because Rowley said so. And even if it was true, it could very well, I'm not saying it is not, but bring the evidence, bring the facts, and do not compromise the investigation by making comments whilst the matter is still ongoing.
So you think that the FUL report, you would agree with the opposition that the FUL report, not the FUL report, sorry, this essay is, well, the FUL report, but they can't lay the FUL report because you have stopped that by the court action. But the SSA report, you think that that should be made public and should be laid in Parliament. Well, or do you have some concerns that because it's a national security issue, some of it should be redacted.
Yeah, right. But the first thing, as it pertains to the FUL report, to clarify, I never blocked it because I didn't want it to go open. I was looking forward to Rowley making a statement so I could sue him yet again. I've been in court for about 4 different matters for defamation and for lies. So I was hoping he would go out in public. When he decided, when I heard that he said he wanted to go in Parliament to read it, have you ever heard people read an audit report in Parliament? No, Parliament is there to change laws. He wanted to go to Parliament because that is the place you can hide like a coward and lie on people and discredit them and not be sued. That is when I took action. If you're a name man and you wanted to call out names and make accusations, be a man for once and say it on the political platform. Don't go in Parliament like a little wimp and try to hide to smear people's character. That is what he did with Emailgate. Listen, people, you need to understand the character of Keith Rowley. This is a man who accused me of being involved in an assassination plot to kill a media reporter. He said it. He believed it. He took ownership of it. And then this is the same man you said, I want him to be commissioner of police. That shows the character of the individual. By him stating he wanted me as a commissioner of police, he could not have asked for me to be commissioner of police, knowing fully well, in his view, that I was planning to kill someone. So he knew what that report was a lie. And he misled the whole country and used that as his template to get into government in 2015. The country cannot be fooled again with his antics of going into Parliament, misleading the country, defaming persons, smearing their character, and just automatically stating, well, I said so, so you all believe it. As it pertains to the SSA report, that SSA report, we have to be very careful. There may be things in that report that can affect national security. So I certainly would not venture into stating, let's make the whole report public. My concern is who did this report. It is just like Stanley John. The man was a judge and you turn him into a James Bond investigator. Yeah, and they find these retired judges. A judge is not trained in investigative capacity. They are trained to analyze the information to come up with a judgment. But that is what they're doing now. They're turning judges now into magnum PIs to do investigations. And they are, as I said, financial procurement of the police, the SSA, the Auditor General, Firearms, the missing files in the AG. That's what they do. Okay, Keith, you're calling me. Let's think about audit. Who are we going to put? Let's put this one. We know this one. And let's pay them millions of taxpayers' dollars. Let them write what you probably want. Read it out in Parliament. Smear the person's name under the word it is alleged. Listen again, Trinidad and Tobago. They made a report on FUL yesterday in Parliament. The man said so many things were wrong with firearms, but yet not one name you could call, not one of these firearms you could seize, and not one person could be arrested after going on 4 years, this massive, well-oiled criminal industry. Let us pick sense from nonsense. And I'm not saying there may not have been irregular activities, because we have been hearing about corruption with firearms decades before me. I put systems in place to put an end to it, and that is what bothered people. I decided to open the Pandora's box to fix it because persons were benefiting, and that was my biggest fault. So as it pertains to the SSA report, an SSA report written by a soldier without intelligence training or investigative capacity experience writing a report is as worthless as the paper he printed it on. This should have been done by the police, by the special branch, and then have persons charged. That is what happened in 1990. I was the youngest officer during the 1990 coup. I know, so we knew who the perpetrators were. We arrested them, we charged them. And in this situation, we are saying this is another coup plot that people are saying yes. So you're saying yes, there's a coup plot, but you don't have the names of the people who did it. Nobody has been charged. So it means that these individuals that the 23 of you all have said yes are still out there. The Prime Minister has probably now compromised the investigation by making it known of what we know in advance. It will affect the police investigation. And because of them still being out there, it is now going to affect our international reputation at enormous proportions that is going to embarrass Trinidad and Tobago. Which tourist, which person anywhere in the world will want to come to Trinidad and Tobago now because Keith Rowley has stated that there was a coup to destabilize the country. They are terrorists. We have Jim Jones' cult group. They were trying to destabilize the government. Why would anyone want to come here? He has now destroyed any shred of tourism or international investment in this country.
So, I mean, but if the audit suggests stuff like that, as you're mentioning, and I know you're saying whatever the effect is on the country, but does the Prime Minister have a responsibility to bring these things to the attention of the citizenry?
No, there's a need to know basis. Correct, good point, Richard, but there's a need to know basis. If a matter is being thoroughly investigated of an assassination plot or a terrorist attempt or an attempted coup or to destabilize the government. You don't rush out there in your excitement in Parliament to brief the country whilst the police are now trying to accumulate the information to target the perpetrators and have them arrested. That is the point. So what is going to happen? This will be just like the Scott drug report. It will be just like Emailgate. It will just be like the firearm audits. You make these wild statements, smear the image and reputation of Trinidad and Tobago, smear the character of persons, and nothing may happen because you have now compromised the investigation, which is still ongoing. And this is just like the firearm report. If there are really persons that were involved in corruption with firearms, and you foolishly continue to speak about all the things that are in the investigation whilst it is still ongoing, you have now compromised the investigation. And that is what these civilians, Hines and Rowley, continue to do. Compromise something that is ongoing. The time when the Prime Minister needs to make the comment is when the matter is closed. We have pinpointed the perpetrators, we have arrested them, and they are no longer a threat to society. That is when you make this statement.
Well, I mean, we will still see how it all plays out because these are ongoing investigations. But I mean, you do use disparaging remarks on the people that they choose to carry out these audits, like Justice Stanley John, etc., and retired Rear Admiral Hayden Pritchard and Barrington and stuff like that. These are all people who would have achieved a certain level of acclaim in their respective fields. And I assume that that's why the state, the government would have chosen these particular types of people in terms of being at the helm of these reports because of their level of service to the country, not to the PNM, to the country, their level of service to the country and the standards of their integrity that they feel comfortably enough to appoint them. People can disagree with appointments because you live in a democracy. But I mean, you know, these are people who have contributed stellar service to the country. So I don't know that encouraging them is useful.
To clarify that, based on what you have just said, then Brian Laron, Kishore and Walcott should build a OPV. You should get Dwayne Bravo to try to do a strategic construction for a new building in police headquarters. The person's capacity and ability for service to the country must be equated with the position you appoint them to. You can't just say because they have served the country well. I have no question to discredit the patriotism and the work of Stanley John, Brigadier Admiral Pritchard, Brigadier General Philip Spencer. But because of their service based on the capacity, you don't put square pegs in round holes based on their service. If you understand my point. So
I understand your point in terms of the investigation part of it you're talking about.
That is the point. And that is what has happened. Because remember, Stanley John, who's a judge, this man stated it was a massive, well-oiled criminal industry. And going on 4 years, not one person has been charged, not one person convicted, not one name called, not one firearm seized. And the only person held has been a fuel dealer who was kidnapped in Barbados based on the instructions of a minister who told the police to go to Barbados. So that shows the point. All of these audits have come up with nothing other than millions upon millions of taxpayers' dollars hiring persons who are not qualified in investigative capacity. My point being, Richard, is these matters are matters for police investigation. Anytime politicians continue to hire people, call it an audit, pay them money, and say it is justified because of their service to country, what you have now done is sideline the police by hiring persons, and that is a sign of democratic dictatorship.
But isn't it too early to say that these reports are not going to yield results? And in terms of investigations into different issues, when people are appointed, it's usually a team. It's not just that person alone. But for somebody like Justice John, for example, I think the overarching aspect of it is that he would be looking at the rules of natural justice being obeyed, which he would have a lot of experience in as a judge. And lawyers do certain amounts of investigations in terms of doing investigative reports and issues. You are trained how to do an investigative report and how to format it and stuff like that. So, but the point I'm making is that they would have a team that would actually be doing a lot of the groundwork too to supplement to the report.
Well, that's the problem, Richard. He didn't have a team. This was a one-man show, and the proof of the pudding is in the eating. if it is he was so good, how come after going on 4 years, all of these reports and all of these allegations, what he did, he just accumulated rum shop talk from anybody. I hear so and so, and somebody tell me so and so, and it is alleged so and so, which is the PNM's rule book for audits. And you put it in a file, and then you'll get the politicians to read it out to smear the person. If he was so good, you will think that after 4 years of him confirming that there was a massive, well-oiled criminal industry, not one weapon was seized based on his report, not one person arrested, not one person charged, not one person convicted, not one name called. He was that good. And it's the same thing with the Barrington report and or with the Craig report. Look at these individuals that they hired. They hired persons to do an FUL audit. And you must know, gentlemen, when you do an audit, the first person you must speak to in an audit is the head of the organization. Because of either your exuberance or your excitement to please those persons who paid you the big money to do the audit, or because of your ignorance, you did not even speak to the person who was in charge of the organization and you did an audit. That is why the High Court said, wait, you all can't be serious. You all did an audit involving all sort of different things, and the person who was in charge of the organization you didn't speak to. They did the same thing again with myself with financial procurement of the police service, because that's going to come shortly again, because Keith Rowley's whole aspect over the next few months before the election is Gary Griffith. Because Kamala Prasad Visesa and the UNC have their 250,000. His concern is Gary Griffith NTA being a COP reloaded that can pull in a little 50, 100,000 that is going to flip it over for the St. Joseph, Tunapuna, Lopido Bonea, Dabadi Omera, San Fernando West, and Sangre Grande. So everything is going to be Gary Griffith. West Indies didn't get to the semi-final, it's Gary Griffith's fault. We almost got hit by a hurricane, it's Gary Griffith. Everything is going to be Gary Griffith. I am going to be living rent-free in his head. So with all of this going on, we have to sit back and analyze exactly what is going on in this country, where our government is hiring people, paying them big money, and all this, and calling it an audit to smear the character of others. The Stanley John report, gentlemen, not one thing has been said, not one person arrested, not one name called, not one weapon seized. In my 3-year period, that is what happened. Not one weapon was lost, not one was stolen, not one was used for a crime. And people are actually upset that I was providing firearms for law-abiding citizens to protect themselves because of the state's inability to defend them. And also, going back to the Roger Best situation, it's the same thing. You did an audit, Philip Spencer, and you never spoke to Roger Best about your findings of the audit before you revealed the audit to the Prime Minister. This is the same thing that Stanley John did. You do an audit and not speak to the head of the organization. Roger Best, listen, we are hearing that there was a plan to destabilize the country. Roger Best, please explain the missing $70,000, 70,000 rounds. Roger Best, did you all purchase 100 weapons? I can tell you, I was the commissioner. The SSA never purchased 100 weapons. They have misinformed. They've been misinformed the Prime Minister because those weapons came from the Defense Force and the police in Kamuto when they were under the Special Anti-Crime Unit, and Eddie Dillon transferred Kamuto barracks to the SSA. But my point being is that you demonize an organization and the head of the organization without speaking to the head of the organization. Just as what Stanley John and Craig did with myself with the audits, and just as what they have done now with Roger Best and the SSA. And again, my point on this is that I am not stating that Roger Best is innocent or guilty. That's not my business. My business is to have due diligence, be independent, be impartial, and do an investigation based on the individuals who are assigned in our constitution to do so, that being the police service. Not you hiring people closely aligned to you, pay them money and let them write a report with it is alleged, it is and we believe and it is rumored. Rum shop talk must stop in being the direction for how we make decisions in this country.
Are you concerned about the 70,000 ammunition round that it is stated as missing?
Well, again, yes, definitely.
Are you concerned?
But you must. But again, we are stating that it is missing because Fitzgerald Hines said so. This is my point. Did you speak to Roger Best to get clarification as to where the 70,000 rounds went? And that is my point. Is it that the rounds have been missing? Is it that certain persons in the SSA gave these rounds to criminal elements to use outside? Is it that police and defense force were using Kamuto as training facilities to utilize the 70,000 rounds? You do not know, because the initial thing on the report, 70,000 rounds we can't account for, without doing proper due diligence by speaking to the head of the SSA at the time. If you didn't speak to the head of the SSA to ascertain and clarify these comments, but You made an official report to the public about these comments. It shows immaturity at the highest level, because you have now made a damning allegation to have the whole country in panic. 70,000 rounds gone. Oh God, look what's going on. And the rounds may very well have been used by the defense force. The rounds could very well have been used by the police in training. The rounds we could now pinpoint to see if the rounds were given to a gang leader. But you're rush inside here, and this man was a police officer. You make a statement of a matter that is ongoing because of your excitement to want to demonize people. And let me clarify why. Because it was a senior minister that continued to intimidate the previous commissioner of police and the director of the SSA to hire a junior police officer to take full control of the Intercept equipment to mark out the phone calls and the conversation and the text messages and the WhatsApp messages of any citizen of this country. And we both objected to him and said, the man is not qualified, he's not trained, and we are very curious that you as a politician continue to harass us to give this junior constable full access to have access to all of the equipment that can allow him to intercept who he wants. That was the concern. Because we didn't adhere to it, you found a way to say your greatest achievement is to remove the one person that was instrumental in the highest reduction in serious crime in 31 years and violent crime in 17 years, and now remove the director of the SSC. Demonizing people because of your own agenda to want to handpick somebody to have full control of the Intercept equipment of this country is a dangerous precedent, Trinidad and Tobago. Because it may not just be my phone and your phone, Richard, and your phone, Steve. It could be each and every one of your phones being intercepted because there's not a proper process for transparency based on the people who had authorization to monitor who is intercepting these things, an independent commissioner of police and an independent director of the SSA.
But getting back to the 70,000 rounds of ammunition, I mean, I want to believe that there has to have been some level of investigation as to where these ammunition would have gone, and that if it was with the police or if it was used by the police or the defense force in legitimate training activities, that would have come up before Pritchard and Barrington. I mean, they must know.
Oh, no, you're mixing it up. The Pritchard and Barrington report had to do with FULs, which I approved.
Sorry.
I asked them to come in. And it was confirmed by one of them that there was nothing negative about me in that report. They were very impressed by what I did, because in the foolish comment made by the Prime Minister that I was overriding persons who were rejecting firearms. That is my right, and I'll tell you why I was rejecting it. Because these individuals were rejecting persons' applications by stating that they were not there was no threat to their life. Persons were holding back firearms at stations. And that is where I realized that is where the corruption was taking place. At the stations, they were holding it back, and that's why we had a backlog of 25,000.
Right,
when I issued 2,000 a year, it would have taken 12 years to deal with all, but that is what people say was too much. So that Pritchard and Barrington had to do with the FULs.
The FUL, right. So that was my mistake there. Yeah. But in the SSA report, in the SSA audit, wouldn't the people who would have done that audit, wouldn't the issue of the defense force and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service using ammunition for training, which is one of the suggestions you made as to where the ammunition could have gone, wouldn't that have been obviously something that they would have checked?
No, but Richard, obviously not, because it goes back to my point with the Craig report that was blocked by the High Court. If these individuals are so clueless to do an audit and not speak to the head of the organization to clarify lies and still publish it as a report to give to our Prime Minister who paid you big money so that he could go in Parliament to smear the character of your political opponent, which is what Parliament is now there for. The same thing has happened again. Because you did an audit. How could you do an audit of the SSA and all of these things and you didn't speak to the head of the SSA? Clarify, because he must be cross-examined, he must be questioned, he's the person responsible. But you didn't even speak to him. So what type of kangaroo court was this? That you could do an audit of the SSA and not speak to the head of the organization that you did the audit on? What madness is this? How could you do an audit of an organization, find discrepancies, and not speak to the head of the organization at the time for clarification? There is something called natural justice. And also, that is the only way you can seek clarification and confirmation from what is rum shop talk, allegations, and rumor to facts. Because if you don't have the facts to say 70,000 missing, and again, don't get me wrong, it could very well be some illegal activity that took place. But we do not know, because you put somebody who was an ambassador and somebody who was a military officer as an investigating officer. So he may not know. This is nothing. Listen, I have the world of respect for Brigadier Philip Spencer. I actually replaced him when he was AD card to the president, and I replaced him at times. So he trained me. I learned a lot from him. But in the same way, I will not lead an investigation because I'm not an investigating officer trained in that. Neither is he. And is it that the police, if this is a matter of national security, of an attempted coup, of terrorist acts, of persons who are trying to destabilize a country, you will put a retired soldier to lead an audit to investigate this? This is supposed to be led by the special branch. This is supposed to be done and conducted in a professional manner. And had the special branch be leading this, they would not have given a report before it has been completed. Because if this matter is still ongoing, how could you make statements that can compromise the investigation or cause the persons who are the perpetrators to cover their tracks, other than your excitement just to want to smear the character of others? Which again is what I said is unfortunate.
So do you think between the SSA report and the FUL report, and those are the two reports that we're more focusing on, do you think that anything is going to come out of these reports? Because eventually they're going to be laid, eventually they're going to come out, they have to come out at some point. Is it that you think that anything is going to come out of these two reports that will be productive in terms of regularizing or making right what has gone wrong? Because they're both reports that are indicating things that went wrong. Yeah. The SSA on one hand, and the FUL, the whole FUL process between firearm dealers, because firearm dealers were mentioned, and the issue of whether there's some sort of complicity in terms of enrichment, in terms of FUL licenses and ammunition and training, and because there was even reference to one person being listed as a firearms dealer, but they weren't licensed as one, and getting access to firearms and ammunition, etc. So it raises a lot of issues.
Yeah, Richard. Well, the first one has fallen flat. You will think that going on 4 years, all of these elements of corruption, because again, I want to, sorry for backtracking. This man said, yes, before in Parliament, that persons who are involved in domestic violence matters got firearms. That is impossible because your wife has to sign it. And if it is true, why did you call the name of the person who got it and have the seize their weapon? He then stated that persons were paying bribes. Persons in reports of an audit said they admitted paying bribes, and then police officers received it. How an official report can have persons stating that they paid bribes and police officers through extortion accepted it, and no name has been called, no weapon seized because of it, and no one arrested? You then said that persons were involved in criminal acts that got a firearm. You need a certificate of character, which means that you got your COC in a wrongful manner. How come no name has been called, no firearm seized, and no one arrested for misbehavior in office on that matter? You then stated that people, both himself and Fitzgerald Hines, that persons got semi-automatic firearms and changed it to automatic. If that happened, that is a criminal offense because not even the commissioner has authority to allow people to do that. Why hasn't that weapon been seized? Why has the name been called and persons arrested? So the FUL thing, yet again, has been a blatant lie. It was a desperate attempt, just like Emailgate, to pump, because look at it, 4 years, going on 4 years, not one person name called, not one weapon seized, not one person arrested, not one person charged. Oh, for God's sake, you can't be such sheep to Keith Rowley to believe this nonsense from this man. And don't get me wrong, because when I was commissioner, I understood the corruption that was going on. And as I said, it happened, the information I was getting was at the stations where they were holding back. That is why we had 25,000 applications, 25,000 outstanding. I was giving out 2,000 a year, which would have taken 12 years to deal with the 25,000 outstanding. And you see that as being too much. That was 0.3% of the population. Half of those 6,000 to 7,000 would have been to previous and present law enforcement officials who needed to protect themselves and their families when they get home. You have a problem with that? And then added to which not one was lost, not one was stolen, not one was used for a crime. So because I did my job efficiently and effectively, I issued 2,000, while others before and after me will issue 300 or 400. So because I gave out 5 times more, the point being is that there was no negligence on my part, because those of the commissioners who gave out less, there were more incidents of negligent discharges, weapons being lost, weapons being stolen, weapons used for a crime. My own was 100% record. Not one lost, not one stolen, not one used for a crime during my 3-year period. So that is what the focus must be on. So the whole firearm nonsense, Stanley John said it, you know. He said it was a massive, well-oiled criminal enterprise. How could you as a judge say that? And you have no evidence, you have no names, you have no witnesses, you have no data, no one arrested, no one charged. It has fallen flat. He has been exposed for what he is. In the SSA situation, if it is that there have been some degree of discrepancy, let the police deal with it. This is a matter of national concern, that they of an attempted coup, of cults, of terrorists destabilizing the government. We are now embarrassed internationally. Again, I want to reemphasize, no citizen abroad will want to come here after you have made that statement. But you're so excited to want to justify what you did by virtually destroying the whole image of the SSA without any evidence, without any names, without any charges being laid. You have now compromised the investigation that should be directed and led by the special branch, not by a previous ambassador and a soldier.
But I know in some of the discussion that we would have had on the Power Breakfast show, I mean, those issues were raised that, well, why aren't people arrested? And in terms of something as serious as a possible conspiracy to overthrow the government. So we'll have to see where it all leads eventually. But ultimately, you don't think much is going to come out of either of those investigations?
No, it's not, because as I said, put in previous judges, put in previous persons in the police service that are so clueless not to understand natural justice to speak to the head of the organization. These two reports that Keith Rowley has laid to try to discredit the previous head of the commissioner of the head of the police and the head of the SSA without even speaking to them says a lot about the ethics and the professionalism of Keith Rowley and the individuals who conducted the audits. Because you cannot do an audit and not speak to the persons who are in charge of the organization that you're auditing. I mean, I have a 5-year-old nephew that understands that. So for anybody who could justify what this man is stating, you do an audit and not speak to the head of the organization, even the pastor and the other persons who were fired. Have you all interrogated them? Because now you have labeled them enemies of the state. They're involved in conspiracy. They're involved in a cult. They're involved in plots to destabilize the government. They're involved in an attempted coup. Have the police called in these people to question them, to verify if they can and should be charged for treason or sedition? No. So you've made this statement because Philip Spencer will say, look, hold that there, Keith. Read it out in Parliament. Madness.
Sorry, clear it up for me. Was it stated somewhere that I'm not too sure if I read it anywhere, but I mean I could have missed it. Was it stated anywhere that they did not in fact interview Roger Best?
I can tell you for a fact that Roger Best was not interviewed as it pertained to what was on. You
spoke with Roger Best concerning it, and he told you that?
Yes, I did.
And he said he wasn't interviewed?
Correct.
Okay.
And therein lies the problem. Roger Best could be innocent or guilty. Not my business. I don't care. That is not my business. What I believe is natural justice. You can't smear the character of others without speaking to them first. They must have their defense. And that is what happened with the FUL report. Stanley John compiled findings without speaking to me for me to clarify. Stanley, you can't say it is alleged that this happened without giving a name. So police officers will just tell you something. This is like the Scott drug report, you know, gentlemen. We had the problem with the Scott drug report because everything on the report, it is alleged, it has been rumored, we have been told. We cannot be doing audits and investigations based on allegations. This is the allegation government. Everything it is alleged, it is alleged. And that word is used to smear political opponents. Get the police, they are the primary aspects for investigations, whether it is for firearm corruption, whether it is for SSA operations involved in an attempted coup. But you do not want the police to lead it, and you deliberately push people who you hire and turn them into investigators. And the investigators that you hire, be it Philip Spencer or Craig or whoever, was so clueless to compile a report and not speak to the head of the organization to get verification based on the allegations that you heard. That can compromise the investigation, and it can cause those persons who may very well be guilty to now cover their tracks because you have now preempted the conclusion of the investigation by the relevant law enforcement authorities, that being the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
So that's why we're going to...
Trinidad and Tobago is what is known as democratic dictatorship.
That's why we're going to have to leave it this morning, Gary, because time is upon us.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us in terms of giving your view on the issues this morning.
Gentlemen, it was a pleasure being on the non-PNM Power Breakfast show this morning.
Behave yourself. Just go out.
Say
I
thank you. Talk to you soon. All right. Thank you, Gary Griffith.